Like many people, especially people that I've met coming to Egypt in the last 20 years, I've had a fascination with anything about ancient Egypt since I was a young child. It is predicted, according to ancient cycles, that we're coming to the end of a major cycle now. So things do speed up at the end of a major cycle, and it's also characteristic by great earth changes, which of course we're seeing. Well, it always starts out by my saying in an interview or when I give a lecture that it is a long story, but we will give the short version and hit the high points. Like many people, especially people that I've met coming to Egypt in the last 20 years, I've had a fascination with anything about ancient Egypt since I was a young child. It dates back to an event that I always talk about in lecture or in interview, that I was about 8 years old, and I opened up an issue of National Geographic magazine and stopped on a picture of the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. And it made a profound effect upon me, which of course at 8 years old I could not articulate. But I know now that I made a deep unconscious connection with the Sphinx. The Sphinx has been a guardian in my life, has led me on many paths, and has led me to where I am today. And again, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but I always had an interest in pictures of the Sphinx and pyramid. And again, at that age, I didn't make a solid decision, I'm going to become an Egyptologist, or I'm going to become an archaeologist. No, it wasn't that. But it did get me into having interest in the sciences. So I went, my academic training, as I have 3 degrees in the sciences, and I went on that way. But it really was almost over 50 years ago now, 1968. I had spent 4 years in the U.S. Air Force. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran. And during that time, I wanted to read things I hadn't had time for in college that I was interested in. And I'd always been interested in the works of Sigmund Freud. Freud always interested me. Well, 1968, I came across a used paperback in a famous bookstore in downtown New York, Manhattan. And the book was called Moses and Monotheism. It was a series of essays that Freud had written before he died that was compiled into a book. And basically, the thesis was that Judaism, and the great lawgiver of Judaism, Moses, had actually been an Egyptian priest under a certain king. And it was this king's teachings that became the basis of Mosaicism. Now, I am born a Jew, so that fascinated me very, very much. I was always interested in the history of my culture. And in Egypt, together, it's sort of a combination. So it became in 1968 that this course would be my life's work. I did independent study in all things Egyptian that I could read. I spent hours and hours in libraries reading all the classics in Egyptology. But it became a point, I got involved with the Rosicrucian order in the late 70s, and we can discuss that before we're done. And they had different stories about Egypt being a more ancient civilization and having great knowledge and wisdom that was passed down. And so I began to reject the theories of academic Egyptology. It seemed like there was more going on, and I became very interested in alternative research. And so I researched all the people that were writing in those days. There's some authors I can mention that really were great influence, like a great Alsatian, a mathematician, philosopher named R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch. We'll discuss him before we're done. He was the first one to question that there was a previous advanced civilization beyond the civilization now. One thing led to another. I finally got the opportunity through a series of miraculous events to go to Egypt in the fall of 1992. Now, in 1987, I had taken part in a conference in San Francisco. So I was on a panel discussion about crystal skulls at San Francisco Whole Life Expo, and there was a group there that had a booth called Power Places Tours, and they were leading tours to Egypt. And I got friendly with the people there. They were into Father Lubitsch like I was, and they mentioned that they had a tour guide, and their tour guide taught the old ways, the old traditions, and he just mentioned the name Hakim, and I never forget it. Well, again, it took me 5 years later. The money came, things happened. I went to Egypt with Power Places Tours, and Hakim was the tour guide. His full name is Abdel Hakim Aouyan. He was a senior tour guide in Egypt for 56 years, passed away in 2008, and he became my teacher and my master. So that's where the whole idea of chematology comes from his teaching.